I fixed her broken crown. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Artificial light bounced off the polished metal walls of the massive space station as Miles Harper made his way through the maintenance corridors. Another day, another repair job in the farthest section of Diplomatic Wing B. Miles had never planned to be a maintenance engineer on Nexus Station, the greatest diplomatic hub in the known universe. 5 years ago, he was just another broke engineering student with student loans threatening to drown him. When the Galactic Confederation opened positions for humans after Earth joined, the pay was too good to pass up. Now he fixed things that broke, kept systems running, and stayed invisible to the hundreds of alien dignitaries who called this place home or visited for diplomatic missions. Harper, got another work order for you. His supervisor's voice crackled through his earpiece. Some kind of electrical malfunction in the Selenian diplomatic quarters. Seems their environmental controls are acting up. Miles sighed. The Selenians? Aren't they the ones with all the royal protocol stuff? Yeah, but this is marked urgent. They've got some big ceremony tonight, and apparently, the throne room's got temperature fluctuations. Just fix it and stay out of sight. Standard procedure. Standard procedure indeed. Most alien species preferred their maintenance staff to remain unseen, especially during diplomatic functions. Humans had a reputation for being good with their hands, but were still considered newcomers to galactic society. Many older species viewed them with a mix of curiosity and condescension. On my way, Miles replied, adjusting his tool belt as he changed direction toward the Selenian section. The Selenian Empire was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the Confederation. Tall, elegant beings with silvery skin and phosphorescent eyes, they were known for their rigid societal structure and elaborate royal traditions. Their queen rarely left their homeworld, making this diplomatic visit a significant event. As Miles approached the ornate entrance to their section, he noticed the increased security. 2 royal guards, towering at nearly 7 feet tall, with ceremonial armor that shimmered like liquid mercury, stood at attention. Maintenance, Miles said, holding up his ID badge. Got a work order for environmental system repairs. The guards exchanged glances, their luminescent eyes narrowing slightly before one spoke in the musical tones of translated Selenian. Proceed through the service entrance only. The royal delegation is preparing for tonight's ceremony. You are not to enter the main chamber under any circumstances. Understood, Miles nodded, already familiar with the protocol. Just point me to the environmental control access panel, and I'll stay out of everyone's way. The service corridors of the Selenian section were as elegantly designed as the main halls, though clearly intended for support staff. Miles followed his station map to the environmental control room, a small chamber tucked behind the grand throne room where the ceremony would take place. As he began diagnosing the system, he quickly identified the issue, a faulty regulator causing temperature fluctuations. The fix was straightforward, but he'd need to access a secondary panel located in a small alcove of the throne room itself. Miles tapped his communicator. Supervisor, I need to access a panel in the main throne room to complete this repair. Hold on, came the reply after a moment. I'm checking with Selenian protocol. They say you can enter briefly through the service door, but only if no royalty is present. If anyone enters, you exit immediately. Clear. Crystal clear, Miles confirmed. The service entrance to the throne room was discreet, designed to allow staff to enter without disrupting proceedings. Miles slipped in quietly, his eyes widening despite himself at the grandeur before him. The Selenian throne room was a magnificent display of their architectural prowess. Soaring ceilings captured and amplified light in a way that created the impression of standing beneath a star-filled sky. The walls were adorned with what appeared to be living metal, flowing in subtle patterns that reminded Miles of ocean currents. At the center stood a raised dais with 2 ornate thrones. The larger one, clearly meant for the queen, was a marvel of engineering and artistry. Constructed from a material that seemed to be somewhere between metal and crystal, it captured and refracted light in hypnotic patterns. Above it floated what must be the royal crown, suspended in a containment field of some sort, rotating slowly. Miles located the access panel and got to work quickly, conscious that royal delegates could arrive at any moment. As he finished the recalibration, a soft but distinct crack echoed through the chamber. He looked up sharply. The containment field around the crown flickered, and as Miles watched in horror, the crown began to fall. Without thinking, he lunged forward, diving across the dais just in time to catch it before it hit the floor. "Oh no," he breathed, examining what he held in his hands. The crown was unlike anything he'd seen before, seemingly made of the same flowing metal as the walls, but with an inner structure of crystal that now showed a clear fracture line running through one section. The containment field generator had failed, and the crown itself was damaged. Before he could decide what to do, the massive doors to the throne room swung open. Miles froze, still holding the crown, as a procession of Selenian royalty entered. At their center walked a figure who could only be Queen Lyria herself, her silver skin almost luminous, adorned in flowing robes that seemed woven from starlight. The procession halted abruptly. Every Selenian eye fixed on Miles, the human maintenance worker holding their sacred royal crown. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded a tall Selenian who Miles guessed was some kind of royal advisor or minister. Miles opened his mouth to explain, but before he could speak, Queen Lyria raised a six-fingered hand for silence. She approached slowly, her phosphorescent eyes studying him with an intensity that made Miles want to disappear into the floor. "Your Majesty," the advisor spoke urgently, "this human has touched the crown of stars. By our most sacred laws." "I am aware of our laws, Advisor Valen," the Queen interrupted, her voice surprisingly deep and melodious through the translator. She stopped directly before Miles, towering over him by at least a foot. "Human," she addressed him directly, "do you understand what you have done?" Miles swallowed hard. "Your Majesty, the containment field failed, and the crown was falling. I only caught it to prevent damage." He hesitated, then added, "Though I can see it's already cracked. I'm sorry, I'm trained in various repair techniques. If you'd allow me, I might be able to fix it." A ripple of what sounded like shocked gasps moved through the Selenian delegation. Queen Lyria's expression remained unreadable, but her eyes narrowed slightly. The crown of stars is not merely a symbol of authority. It is a technological marvel crafted by our ancestors 1,000 years ago. Its inner mechanisms are beyond your understanding. Miles nodded respectfully, but couldn't help responding. "With respect, Your Majesty, I specialize in cross-species technology integration. I might surprise you." A tense silence fell over the room. The royal advisor, Valen, looked scandalized at Miles's continued audacity. After what seemed like an eternity, Queen Lyria spoke. "The ceremony commences in 3 hours. The crown must be worn. Without it, 1,000 years of tradition is broken, and the diplomatic negotiations cannot proceed." She paused, studying Miles with those piercing eyes. "You have until then to attempt your repair, human. If you succeed, we may overlook this breach of protocol. If you fail..." She left the consequence unstated. "I understand," Miles said, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. "Advisor Valen will provide you with a workspace and whatever tools we can furnish," the Queen continued. "But remember this," her voice dropped lower. "That crown is paired with my neural signature. Only my mate can touch it without consequences. In catching it, you have already violated one of our most sacred traditions." Miles blinked in surprise. "Your mate. In your terms, a spouse or life partner," Valen clarified stiffly. "The royal consort is the only one permitted to handle the crown besides the monarch. It is an intimate connection." Great, Miles thought. Not only had he touched alien royalty's crown, but he'd also apparently committed some kind of intimate taboo in the process. Just another day at Nexus Station. "I'll fix it," he promised, hoping his engineering skills were up to the task. 2 Selenian guards escorted Miles to a small adjacent chamber that appeared to serve as a preparation room. A workbench was quickly furnished with an array of tools, some familiar, others distinctly alien in design. Advisor Valen hovered nearby, his disapproval radiating like a physical force. "This is unprecedented," he muttered. "In all my years serving the royal house, never has an outsider been permitted to handle the crown of stars, let alone attempt to repair it." Miles carefully placed the crown on the workbench and began examining it under a magnification field. "What exactly does it do? Besides symbolize her authority, I mean." Valen hesitated, clearly reluctant to share information but aware that Miles needed to understand the crown's function to repair it. "The crown of stars is an interface device," he finally explained. "It connects the Queen to our ancestral knowledge base and allows her to access the collective wisdom of past rulers during important decisions. The crystalline structure you see holds quantum entanglement pathways that link to our homeworld's central archives." Miles whistled softly. "So it's essentially a neural interface disguised as a crown." "That's brilliant." "It is far more than that," Valen corrected stiffly. "It is the physical manifestation of our civilization's continuity. Without it functioning properly for tonight's ceremony, the Queen cannot complete the ritual of discernment that will determine our position in the upcoming trade negotiations." As Miles continued his examination, he identified the problem. The fracture in the crystal had disrupted the quantum pathways, and the flowing metal exterior, which he now realized was actually a sophisticated cooling system, had begun to compensate incorrectly, causing further stress on the structure. "I think I can fix this," he said after several minutes of careful analysis. "But I'll need some specialized equipment from my own toolkit. Is there any way to get authorization for that?" Valen's expression suggested he'd rather eat dirt than allow further human involvement, but he tapped the communication device on his wrist. After a brief conversation in untranslated Selenian, he nodded reluctantly. "You may request the items you need. They will be brought here and scanned for compatibility." For the next 2 hours, Miles worked meticulously, combining human engineering techniques with what he knew of Selenian technology. The crown was a masterpiece of engineering, far more complex than he had initially thought. The quantum pathways were self-healing to a degree, but the fracture had been severe enough to overwhelm that capacity. Using a microfusion welder and a crystalline bonding agent he developed himself for similar repairs, Miles carefully rejoined the fractured pathways, working at a molecular level. The flowing metal exterior presented another challenge. It responded to thermal changes in ways he hadn't anticipated, requiring constant adjustments to his approach. Throughout the process, various Selenian officials came and went, watching him work with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. Only Valen remained constant, observing every movement Miles made with hawkish intensity. "The outer shell is reinforced now," Miles explained as he worked, partly to fill the uncomfortable silence, and partly because explaining helped him think. "But the real issue is realigning these quantum pathways. They're like, well, imagine neural connections that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. You cannot possibly understand the principles at work," Valen responded dismissively. Miles bit back a retort and focused on his work. He'd encountered similar attitudes from other established species. The assumption that humans, as galactic newcomers, couldn't possibly grasp the advanced technologies developed over thousands of years. Yet that underestimation had often worked to humanity's advantage. Without preconceived notions of what was impossible, humans often found innovative solutions where others saw only established limitations. As the third hour approached, Miles finally completed the delicate process of realigning the quantum pathways. The crown began to emit a soft, pulsing glow, a good sign, he hoped. "I think that's it," he said, carefully setting down his tools. "The fracture is sealed, and the quantum pathways are realigned. The containment field generator was also damaged, but I've bypassed it with a temporary solution. You'll want your specialist to replace it properly after the ceremony." Valen studied the crown, his expression unreadable. "It appears functional, but the true test will be neural synchronization with the Queen." As if summoned by his words, the door slid open, and Queen Lyria entered, now dressed in full ceremonial regalia that made her look even more imposing. Several attendants followed, but she waved them back, approaching the workbench alone. "You have completed your attempt?" she asked Miles directly. "Yes, Your Majesty. I believe I've repaired the damaged sections and restored functionality. However, as your advisor mentioned, the true test will be when you connect with it." The Queen's luminescent eyes studied the crown, then shifted to Miles. "You have worked with surprising diligence, human. What is your name?" "Miles Harper, Your Majesty." "Miles Harper," she repeated, the name sounding strangely melodic in her voice. "If this repair proves successful, you will have done our kingdom a great service. And if not, the consequences remain," Valen added pointedly. The Queen extended her hands, and Miles carefully lifted the crown, placing it in her open palms. Their fingers brushed momentarily, and he noticed her skin was cool to the touch, with a texture like smooth silk over metal. Queen Lyria closed her eyes as she held the crown, and Miles saw it begin to pulse more brightly, the flowing metal exterior moving more rapidly. After several tense moments, her eyes opened again, now glowing with the same intensity as the crown itself. "The connection is restored," she announced, and Miles heard audible sighs of relief from the attendants. "The repair is sufficient for the ceremony." Miles felt a wave of relief wash over him. "I'm glad I could help, Your Majesty." The Queen studied him with those glowing eyes. "You have demonstrated unexpected skill, Miles Harper. However, there remains the matter of your violation of our sacred tradition. The crown was touched by one who is not royal consort." Miles tensed again. "Right. There was still that problem. In catching the crown, you prevented greater damage," the Queen continued. "Yet traditions cannot simply be dismissed, even in unusual circumstances." She turned to Valen. "What does protocol dictate in such a case?" The advisor looked deeply uncomfortable. "There is no precedent, Your Majesty. In all our history, no outsider has handled the crown of stars. The traditional penalty for a non-consort touching the crown is—" He glanced at Miles, severe. Miles tried to keep his expression neutral, though his heart was now racing. He'd heard stories about the rigid justice systems of some older civilizations. This repair job was turning into a diplomatic incident. "Perhaps," Queen Lyria said thoughtfully, "we must create a new precedent. The human acted to protect our sacred artifact, not to defile it. And he has successfully repaired damage that our own specialists might have required days to address." She turned back to Miles. "You will attend tonight's ceremony, Miles Harper." "I what?" Miles blinked in surprise. "As the repairer of the crown of stars, you have earned a place as witness to its function. This will satisfy tradition while acknowledging your service." Her tone made it clear this was not a request, but a command. Valen looked like he might protest, but thought better of it. "I will arrange appropriate attire," he said stiffly. Miles found himself being ushered out by Selenian attendants, his tools carefully packed, and returned to him. As he left, he caught one last glimpse of Queen Lyria placing the repaired crown above her throne, where it floated once more in a containment field, this one generated by the throne itself rather than the separate system that had failed. The Queen's gaze met his briefly across the room, and Miles could have sworn he saw something like amusement flash in those luminescent eyes. Hours later, dressed in formal attire that the Selenians had somehow produced in his size, Miles stood at the back of the throne room, watching the ceremony unfold. Diplomatic representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, creating a tapestry of diverse life, forms unlike anything he'd ever seen back on Earth. Queen Lyria sat upon her throne, the repaired crown now hovering just above her head, connected to her by filaments of light so thin they were barely visible. As the ceremony progressed, Miles realized he was witnessing something few outsiders ever saw: the Selenian ritual of discernment, where the monarch communed with ancestral wisdom to guide diplomatic decisions. The crown glowed brightly, and patterns of light danced across the queen's silver skin. Her eyes had taken on that same intense glow he'd seen earlier, suggesting a deep connection to whatever ancient knowledge the crown provided access to. Beside him, a voice spoke softly. Quite impressive for a human repair job. Miles turned to find Advisor Valen standing nearby, his attention on the ceremony, but his words clearly directed at Miles. "Thank you. I think," Miles responded quietly. "The Queen believes your intervention was fortuitous rather than merely accidental." Valen continued, his tone neutral. "She senses patterns that others do not." Before Miles could ask what he meant, the advisor added, "The Crown's connection is stronger than it was before. Somehow, your repair has enhanced the neural interface beyond its previous capacity." Miles watched as the light show around the Queen intensified. "I noticed the quantum pathways had developed redundancies over time that were actually restricting throughput. I cleared those while repairing the fracture." Valen gave him a sidelong glance that might have contained a hint of reluctant respect. Perhaps there is something to be said for fresh perspectives unbound by tradition. He paused, though tradition itself remains vital. The ceremony concluded with Queen Lyria rising from her throne, the crown settling gently onto her head. The assembled diplomats bowed in respect, a gesture Miles hastily mimicked. As the formal proceedings ended and the gathering transitioned to a reception, Miles expected to be dismissed. He'd done his job, witnessed the ceremony as commanded, and surely would now return to his regular duties. He began making his way toward an exit, hoping to slip away unnoticed. "Engineer Harper." The Queen's voice, amplified slightly by some unseen technology, stopped him in his tracks. The crowd parted as Queen Lyria approached, the crown still adorning her head, its glow now subdued but still present. Miles bowed again, acutely aware of the hundreds of eyes watching this unexpected interaction. "Your Majesty, the crown of stars functions better than it has in generations," she stated, her voice carrying to ensure all heard. "Your skill has served the Selenian Empire well today." "I'm honored to have been of service," Miles replied, falling back on the diplomatic phrasings he'd picked up during his years on the station. "I sense there is more to you than appears on the surface, Miles Harper," the Queen said, her head tilting slightly as she studied him. "Just as there was more to the crown's functioning than our specialists had realized." Miles wasn't sure how to respond to that. Before he could formulate a reply, the Queen continued, "The Selenian Empire values innovation balanced with tradition. Too often, we have allowed the latter to overshadow the former." She gestured to the assembled diplomats. "Tonight's discussions will center on new trade agreements and technology exchanges. Perhaps it would be valuable to have a perspective that sees beyond established limitations." It took Miles a moment to realize what she was suggesting. "Your Majesty, I'm just a maintenance engineer. I'm not a diplomat or negotiator. Yet you negotiated the complex pathways of our most sacred artifact with remarkable success," she countered. "Sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected sources." And so, to his complete bewilderment, Miles found himself invited to attend the high-level diplomatic negotiations as a technical consultant to the Selenian delegation. As he followed the procession into the conference chambers, he caught sight of his supervisor watching from a distance, jaw practically on the floor. Miles gave a small, bewildered shrug. It seemed fixing things had led him somewhere unexpected, right into the center of galactic diplomacy. And all because he'd caught a falling crown. What he didn't yet realize was that the repair he'd made had consequences far beyond tonight's ceremony. Consequences that would soon draw him even deeper into the complex world of Selenian royalty and interstellar politics. The quantum pathways he'd restored carried more than just ancestral knowledge. They carried secrets that some would kill to protect. And Queen Lyria, with her enigmatic smile and calculating eyes, had plans of her own for the human who had dared to touch her broken crown. Miles quickly discovered that diplomatic negotiations were a different kind of engineering problem, one where the components were political agendas, cultural sensitivities, and carefully concealed objectives. The conference chamber was arranged in a circular formation, with representatives from 23 different species seated at elaborately designed stations that accommodated their various physiological needs. Queen Lyria presided from an elevated position, the repaired crown still gleaming on her head. Miles sat slightly behind the main Selenian delegation, next to a junior advisor who occasionally whispered explanations about the proceedings. The discussion centered on a proposed trade corridor through a contested sector of space. The Selenian Empire controlled key navigational beacons, making their cooperation essential. The Crown allows Her Majesty to access historical context for these negotiations. The junior advisor, who had introduced himself as Tauren, explained quietly. Previous treaties, the outcomes of similar arrangements, even the personal notes of queens from centuries past. Miles nodded, impressed but still confused about why he'd been invited. And I'm here because the Queen values unique perspectives, Tauren replied diplomatically, though his tone suggested he found this as puzzling as Miles did. As the negotiations progressed, Miles noticed something odd. Whenever certain delegates spoke, particularly representatives from the Voxian Consortium, Queen Lyria's crown would pulse slightly differently, and she would touch her temple briefly, as if experiencing discomfort. During a recess, Miles approached Advisor Valen. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I noticed something about the Crown's energy pattern when specific topics are discussed. Valen's expression tightened. You should not be monitoring the Crown's functions. I wasn't trying to, Miles assured him. But since I repaired it, I recognize certain patterns. When the Voxian representatives mention their proposed security arrangements, there's a fluctuation that seems to be causing the Queen discomfort. Valen was silent for a moment, his luminescent eyes narrowing. The Crown sometimes registers discrepancies in diplomatic discourse. Discrepancies? You mean lies? That would be an oversimplification, Valen replied stiffly. But yes, intentional deception creates interference patterns in the quantum network. Miles considered this. So it's essentially a highly advanced lie detector? Among many other functions, Valen conceded reluctantly. This is highly confidential information, Engineer Harper. Of course, Miles nodded. But if that's the case, the fluctuation I'm seeing might indicate the Voxians aren't being truthful about their security protocols. Valen studied Miles with renewed interest. Perhaps the Queen's instinct about you was correct after all. He gestured toward a private alcove where Queen Lyria was conferring with senior advisors. Come. She should hear this directly. As they approached, Miles noticed the Queen rubbing her temple again, the crown's glow pulsing erratically. Your Majesty, Valen bowed. Engineer Harper has made an observation that may be relevant to our negotiations. Queen Lyria turned her attention to Miles, her expression unreadable. Speak freely, Engineer. Miles explained what he had noticed about the Crown's behavior during specific exchanges, feeling increasingly self-conscious under the scrutiny of the royal entourage. The interface is causing you discomfort because it's detecting deception, he concluded. But I think the disruption is stronger than it should be because of how I repaired the quantum pathways. I enhanced the throughput, which might be making the signals more intense. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly. You believe the Voxians are concealing something significant regarding their security arrangements? I can't speak to the politics, Your Majesty, Miles clarified. I'm just reporting what the technology is indicating based on what Advisor Valen explained about its function. Queen Lyria exchanged glances with her advisors before returning her gaze to Miles. Few outside our inner circle understand the Crown's capabilities as a discernment tool. She studied him for a moment longer. During the next session, you will sit with the primary delegation. If you observe further fluctuations, signal Advisor Valen immediately. When negotiations resumed, Miles found himself seated at the main table, drawing curious and sometimes suspicious glances from the other delegations. The Voxian representatives, insectoid beings with multifaceted eyes and chitinous exoskeletons, seemed particularly disturbed by his unexpected promotion. The human presence is irregular. The lead Voxian diplomat chittered through a translator. These discussions involve classified security matters. Engineer Harper serves as our technical consultant, Queen Lyria replied smoothly. His expertise is relevant to the beacon network we are discussing. The negotiations continued, and Miles paid careful attention to the Crown's reactions. When the Voxians presented detailed specifications for their proposed security oversight of the trade corridor, The disruption pattern returned stronger than before. Miles subtly signaled Valen as instructed. The advisor immediately raised a point of clarification, asking the Voxians to elaborate on certain technical aspects of their security protocols. As they delved deeper into specifics, the Crown's disruption intensified, and Queen Lyria's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Perhaps," she interrupted, her voice carrying a new edge, "we should discuss the secondary scanning capabilities your proposal fails to mention." The chamber fell silent. The lead Voxian diplomat's antennae twitched nervously. "I do not understand your Majesty's concern," they responded after a moment. "Our proposal contains complete technical specifications." "Does it?" Queen Lyria's eyes flashed, the crown above her head pulsing in sync with her apparent anger. "Our analysis suggests your security scanners would allow for the covert collection of proprietary data from passing vessels, data beyond what is necessary for security verification." The Voxian delegation erupted in a flurry of untranslated chittering. Miles watched in fascination as the diplomatic veneer cracked, revealing the underlying tension. "Such allegations are unfounded," the Voxian representative finally responded. "We seek only to ensure safe passage." "Then you will have no objection to a neutral third party reviewing the complete technical specifications," Queen Lyria countered, "including the quantum encryption modules you have not disclosed." The negotiations deteriorated rapidly after that, with the Voxian delegation calling for an extended recess to review their documentation. As the delegates dispersed, Miles found himself the center of attention among the Selenian contingent. "Your observation was astute," Queen Lyria acknowledged, the crown now settled into a steady, calmer glow. "The Voxians have been attempting to insert surveillance capabilities into the trade corridor for 3 negotiation cycles. Thanks to your repair of the crown, their deception was impossible to conceal." Miles felt a strange mixture of pride and unease. He hadn't intended to become involved in interstellar politics, yet here he was, influencing negotiations between ancient civilizations. "I was just interpreting the technology, Your Majesty," he said modestly. "A rare skill," she replied, "particularly among those who understand both the technology itself and the subtle cues of its behavior." As the delegation returned to the Selenian section to prepare for the evening's continued negotiations, Miles found himself walking alongside Queen Lyria, an honor that clearly surprised the other Selenians. "Your crown, the neural interface, it's remarkable technology," Miles commented. "I've never seen quantum entanglement harnessed that way before." "It is our civilization's greatest achievement," Queen Lyria responded, "and also our greatest vulnerability. The knowledge contained within is beyond value." They paused in a corridor overlooking an artificial garden where bioluminescent plants created patterns of light and shadow. "You mentioned earlier that only your mate can touch the crown," Miles said, curiosity overcoming his caution. "May I ask why? Is it a cultural tradition, or is there a technological reason?" The queen considered him for a moment before responding. "Both. The crown forms a quantum bond with the monarch's neural pathways. This bond can be disrupted by foreign neural signatures, with one exception, a mate whose mind has already formed compatible neural patterns through the bonding ritual." "So it's not just symbolic," Miles said, understanding dawning. "It's a genuine technical limitation." "Indeed. Though in your case." She paused, studying him with those luminescent eyes. "The crown did not reject your touch as severely as it should have. This is unusual." Before Miles could process the implications of that statement, a commotion erupted further down the corridor. Royal guards rushed forward as a figure in Selenian diplomatic attire staggered toward them, clearly injured. "Ambassador Nelrin." Queen Lyria recognized the injured Selenian immediately. The ambassador collapsed into the arms of the guards, silver blood seeping from a wound in his side. "Voxians," he gasped. "They've discovered, sabotage plan revealed. They know the crown detected." More guards arrived, securing the area and rushing the injured ambassador to medical facilities. In the chaos, Miles found himself ushered along with the Queen's security detail back to the Selenian royal chambers. The Voxians have resorted to violence, Advisor Valen said grimly once they were secured in the inner chamber. Ambassador Nelrin was investigating their delegation after your Majesty's revelations about their deception. This is an act of war, one of the senior advisors declared. Queen Lyria's expression remained calm, though the crown above her head pulsed with rapid, intense bursts of energy. We must respond with measured strength. Valen, alert station security and request confinement of the Voxian delegation. As the advisors hurried to execute her orders, the Queen turned to Miles. It seems you are now caught in a diplomatic crisis, Engineer Harper. I should return to my regular duties, Miles suggested, feeling thoroughly out of his depth. This is far beyond my expertise. I think not, Queen Lyria replied. The Voxians now know your role in exposing their deception. You are safer here, under our protection. Before Miles could argue, alarms blared throughout the station. A voice over the intercom announced a security breach in progress and ordered all personnel to secure locations. They would not dare attack the royal chambers, Valen said, though his tone lacked conviction. The Queen's expression hardened. The Voxians have clearly abandoned diplomatic norms. We must prepare for all contingencies. She turned to Miles. You understand the Crown's technology better than anyone outside our inner circle. If something happens to me, the Crown must be protected and delivered to the Selenian homeworld. Your Majesty, nothing's going to happen to you, Miles assured her, though the rapid escalation of events left him feeling increasingly anxious. Nevertheless, contingencies must be established, she insisted. She removed the crown from her head, the first time Miles had seen her without it since the ceremony. The flowing metal exterior slowed its movement as it disconnected from her neural signature. In the event of an emergency, she instructed, handing it to an ornately decorated box that Valen had retrieved. This containment unit will preserve the crown's integrity temporarily. It cannot maintain the quantum pathways indefinitely, but it will suffice until it reaches our homeworld. The crown was secured in the container, which Valen then placed on a pedestal in the center of the chamber. Barely 10 minutes later, the situation deteriorated further. Reports came in of fighting near the diplomatic wing, and station security seemed to be struggling to contain the conflict. The Voxians have activated sleeper agents throughout the station, a security officer reported. They're targeting key systems and security checkpoints. Queen Lyria's expression remained impassive, but Miles could see the tension in her posture. We must move to the secure bunker, she decided. Valen, initiate evacuation protocol. As the royal entourage prepared to relocate, Miles found himself staying close to the Queen and the container holding the crown. Despite his complete lack of diplomatic or security training, he felt responsible for the artifact he had repaired, and for the crisis his repair had inadvertently precipitated. They were halfway to the secure bunker when the lights throughout the station flickered and died, plunging the corridors into darkness. Emergency lighting activated moments later, bathing everything in a dim red glow. They've breached the power distribution network, Valen reported grimly. Station defenses will be compromised. No sooner had he spoken than an explosion rocked the corridor ahead of them. Through the smoke, Miles glimpsed the chitinous forms of Voxian soldiers advancing rapidly. The Selenian guards moved to engage them, energy weapons flaring in the dim light. Queen Lyria was quickly surrounded by a protective formation, with Valen clutching the container holding the crown. This way, a guard shouted, indicating an auxiliary passage. We can reach the bunker through the maintenance tunnels. As they changed course, Miles realized with a jolt that they were heading toward familiar territory, the same maintenance corridors he navigated daily. I know these tunnels, he told the Queen. If you're trying to reach the central security sector, I can show you the fastest route. Queen Lyria nodded sharply. Lead on, Engineer Harper. Miles guided the royal party through the labyrinthine maintenance tunnels, using his access codes to bypass security checkpoints. The sounds of fighting echoed distantly through the station, suggesting the conflict had spread beyond the diplomatic wing. They had almost reached the security sector when disaster struck. A hidden explosive device detonated in a side passage just as they passed, sending debris flying and separating Miles, Queen Lyria, and Valen from the rest of the guards. Valen was thrown against a wall, the crown container flying from his grasp. Miles lunged for it instinctively, catching it before it could hit the ground, an echo of how this whole situation had begun. Advisor Valen is injured, the Queen announced, kneeling beside her fallen advisor. Silver blood seeped from a wound on his head, his luminescent eyes flickering weakly. "We need to keep moving," Miles urged, hearing sounds of pursuit. "Can he walk?" "I can manage," Valen insisted, struggling to his feet with the Queen's assistance. They continued at a slower pace, with Miles leading and the Queen supporting Valen. The security sector remained tantalizingly close, just 2 more junctions away according to Miles's mental map of the station. As they rounded a corner, they found their path blocked by 3 Voxian soldiers, weapons raised. Miles froze, the container clutched protectively against his chest. "Surrender the crown artifact," the lead Voxian demanded, mandibles clicking menacingly. Queen Lyria stepped forward, her regal bearing undiminished by the crisis. "You commit an act of war against the Selenian Empire. Stand down immediately." The Voxians advanced steadily. "The crown technology will be analyzed and replicated. The Voxian consortium will no longer be subjected to Selenian deception detection." Miles glanced around desperately, seeking any advantage. His eyes fell on a maintenance panel near the ceiling, one controlling the local environmental systems. A plan formed in his mind. "Your Majesty," he whispered, "when I say now, close your eyes and hold your breath." She gave him a barely perceptible nod, still facing the Voxian soldiers with defiant dignity. Miles shifted slightly, positioning himself to reach the panel. "You know," he said loudly to the Voxians, "there's something about insectoid nervous systems that's always fascinated me." The Voxians paused, their multifaceted eyes focusing on him with predatory intensity. "They're incredibly sensitive to certain environmental stimuli," Miles continued, edging closer to the panel. "Like sudden pressure changes and concentrated carbon dioxide." With a swift movement, he slammed his fist against the emergency override on the panel. "Now," Queen Lyria closed her eyes and held her breath just as the corridor's environmental systems went into emergency purge mode. A blast of concentrated fire suppression gas filled the space, creating a momentary fog while simultaneously changing the atmospheric pressure dramatically. The effect on the Voxian soldiers was immediate and severe. Their exoskeletons were designed to maintain internal pressure against the vacuum of space, not rapid atmospheric changes. They collapsed, their nervous systems overwhelmed by the sudden environmental shift. "This way," Miles urged, guiding the Queen and the still-dazed Valen past the incapacitated Voxians. "The gas won't affect them for long." They finally reached the security sector, where station forces had established a defensive perimeter. Medical personnel immediately attended to Valen while security officers debriefed the Queen on the situation. "The Voxian insurrection is being contained," the security chief reported. "Their main force was concentrated in the diplomatic wing, but we've encountered sleeper agents throughout the station." Queen Lyria nodded gravely. "And their delegation leadership?" "Captured while attempting to reach their ship. They've been placed in high-security containment." As the situation stabilized, Miles found himself still holding the container with the crown. He approached the Queen, intending to return it now that the immediate danger had passed. "Your Majesty, I believe this belongs with you," he said, offering the container. Queen Lyria studied him with an unreadable expression before accepting it. "Twice now you have protected our most sacred artifact, Miles Harper. Once from accident, and now from those who would steal it." "Just doing what needed to be done," Miles replied, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The Queen opened the container, retrieving the crown and placing it once more upon her head. The flowing metal exterior immediately resumed its fluid movement, the glow intensifying as it reconnected with her neural pathways. "Curious," she murmured after a moment. The crown has registered your neural signature. Miles blinked in surprise. Is that normal? It is unprecedented, she replied. As I told you before, only a royal consort's neural pattern should be compatible. Her luminescent eyes studied him with new interest. There is something unique about your mind, Engineer Harper. Something that resonates with our ancient technology in ways we do not yet understand. Before Miles could process this revelation, a delegation of high-ranking officials from the Galactic Confederation arrived, summoned by the station's distress call. The diplomatic crisis was escalating beyond the station itself, bringing representatives from dozens of worlds to address the Voxian aggression. In the days that followed, Miles found himself increasingly integrated into the Selenian delegation. His technical expertise regarding the crown proved valuable as investigations revealed the full extent of the Voxian plot, a years-long espionage operation aimed at neutralizing the Selenian advantage in diplomatic negotiations. They sought to create a countermeasure to the crown's discernment capabilities, Valen explained during one briefing. He had recovered from his injuries and now treated Miles with a respect that bordered on collegiality. Had they succeeded, they could have deceived not just us, but any civilization in negotiations. The Voxian consortium faced severe sanctions from the Confederation, with multiple worlds severing diplomatic ties. Queen Lyria, leveraging her position of strength, pushed for reforms in interstellar transparency regulations rather than purely punitive measures, a move that elevated Selenian standing further. Throughout these developments, Miles continued to work closely with the Queen and her advisors, primarily focused on enhancing security for the Crown. The experience he'd gained during the repair proved invaluable as they developed new containment protocols. One evening, as diplomatic proceedings wound down, Queen Lyria requested a private audience with Miles in the Royal Garden, the same bioluminescent sanctuary they had passed before the attack. Engineer Harper, she began formally, though her tone carried a warmth that had been developing over their days of collaboration. The Selenian Empire owes you a debt of gratitude that cannot easily be repaid. I'm just glad I could help, Your Majesty, Miles responded, still somewhat uncomfortable with the attention his actions had garnered. Though I'm looking forward to getting back to my regular maintenance duties once things settle down. Queen Lyria's expression shifted subtly. That is actually the matter I wish to discuss. I have been in communication with your station administrators regarding your position. Miles felt a flutter of alarm. I hope my involvement in this situation hasn't caused problems with my employment. Quite the contrary, she assured him. I have requested that you be permanently assigned as a technical liaison to the Selenian diplomatic mission. Miles stared at her in surprise. That's quite a promotion. It is merely the beginning, Queen Lyria continued. Your unique understanding of our technology, combined with your innovative human perspective, represents a valuable resource to the Empire. As she spoke, Miles noticed the crown above her head pulsing in a pattern he hadn't seen before, softer, almost harmonious. There is another matter, the Queen added, her voice taking on a more personal tone. The crown's unusual response to your neural signature remains a subject of significant interest. Our scientists believe further study could yield insights into cross-species compatibility with our ancestral technology. I'd be happy to participate in any research that might help, Miles offered. Such research would require your presence on the Selenian homeworld, Queen Lyria explained. A diplomatic position has been created for you, should you wish to accept it. Miles felt momentarily overwhelmed. Just weeks ago, he had been an anonymous maintenance engineer, invisible to the diplomatic elites. Now he was being offered a position that would take him to one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. This is unexpected, he managed. I'm honored, but it's a lot to consider. Queen Lyria nodded. Of course, you should take time to reflect on the offer. She paused, then added more quietly. There is one additional factor you should be aware of. Miles waited, noting how the Queen seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. The compatibility between your neural signature and the crown suggests potential for a deeper connection than we initially understood, she said carefully. In Selenian history, Such compatibility has only been documented in cases where individuals share a particular type of quantum resonance. A phenomenon our ancestors discovered is correlated with personal affinity. Miles blinked, trying to follow her meaning. Personal affinity? In human terms, she clarified, her luminescent eyes meeting his directly. A natural synchronization of minds that forms the foundation of what you might call compatibility. The kind of compatibility traditionally found between a monarch and their chosen consort. The implications of her words gradually registered, and Miles felt his face warm. Are you suggesting? I am suggesting nothing definitive, Queen Lyria replied, though the crown above her head pulsed in that same harmonious pattern. Merely sharing information you should have when considering your future path. She extended her six-fingered hand, palm up, a gesture Miles had learned was a Selenian indication of open communication. Whatever you decide, Miles Harper, you have earned the respect of the Selenian Empire. My respect. Tentatively, Miles placed his hand in hers, noting again the cool silk-over-metal texture of her skin. The moment their hands touched, the crown flared briefly with intense light, then settled into a steady, bright glow. Queen Lyria's eyes widened slightly. Fascinating, she murmured. Miles felt it too, a strange resonance, as if some invisible current passed between them. It was unlike anything he'd experienced before, yet somehow felt natural, even familiar. I think, he said slowly, finding confidence in this unexpected connection. I'd like to learn more about this position on your homeworld, and about Selenian quantum resonance. The Queen's expression softened into what Miles now recognized as a smile, subtle by human standards but expressive for a Selenian. I believe that would be mutually beneficial, she replied, her fingers lightly curling around his. In the months that followed, Miles Harper's life transformed completely. The humble maintenance engineer became a respected diplomat, traveling between Nexus Station and the Selenian homeworld. His technical expertise, combined with his unique neural compatibility with Selenian technology, made him invaluable to ongoing technological exchange programs. The connection between Miles and Queen Lyria deepened as well, evolving from professional collaboration to personal friendship, and eventually to something more profound. The quantum resonance between them, first detected through the crown, proved to be the foundation for a bond that transcended their different species and backgrounds. When the formal announcement came, the first human-Selenian royal consort bonding in galactic history, it caused a sensation throughout the Confederation. Many viewed it as a powerful symbol of cooperation between established galactic powers and the relatively new human presence among the stars. On the day of the bonding ceremony, Miles stood before the assembled dignitaries of 24 worlds, dressed in formal attire that blended human and Selenian design elements. As Queen Lyria approached, the crown of stars hovering above her head, he reflected on the strange path that had led him here. It had all begun with a simple repair job, catching a falling crown and fixing its broken components. That moment of quick thinking had revealed capabilities within him that neither he nor the Selenians had imagined possible. It had also revealed that sometimes the most significant connections form in the most unexpected ways. Queen Lyria stood before him now, her luminescent eyes meeting his with warmth that had become familiar. The crown above her head pulsed with that now familiar harmonious pattern. Miles Harper of Earth, she addressed him, her voice carrying clearly through the grand chamber. You first touched this crown as a stranger, violating our most sacred tradition. A ripple of amused understanding moved through the Selenian contingent. Today, you touch it as royal consort, upholding that same tradition. She lifted the crown from above her head and extended it toward Miles. The chamber fell silent, all eyes fixed on this historic moment. Miles reached out, placing his hands carefully on the flowing metal surface of the crown. As his fingers made contact, the crown flared with brilliant light, the quantum pathways connecting instantly with his neural signature in a way that felt like coming home. Together, they raised the crown and placed it once more above Queen Lyria's head, where it floated serenely, now connected to both their minds in a three-way quantum bond unprecedented in Selenian history. What was once broken has been made stronger, Queen Lyria declared, completing the ceremonial words. What was once separate is now united. Miles smiled, remembering his first panicked thought when he'd caught the falling crown months ago. Who would have thought that a routine maintenance call would lead to this moment, standing beside an alien queen as her consort, bridging two civilizations through a bond both technological and deeply personal. The crown that had once caused such diplomatic turmoil now symbolized something new. The unexpected harmony that could develop between different species and cultures when they remained open to new possibilities. As Miles and Queen Lyria turned to face the assembled delegates, the crown glowed brilliantly above them, its flowing metal exterior moving in perfect synchronization with both their thoughts, no longer broken, but transformed into something greater than its original design had ever anticipated. In the years that followed, this unusual partnership would help reshape galactic politics, with human innovation complementing Selenian tradition to address challenges neither civilization could have solved alone. And it had all begun because a human engineer had simply done what came naturally to him, catching something precious before it could fall and finding a way to fix what was broken. The Voxian plot, intended to undermine Selenian influence, had instead catalyzed an alliance that strengthened both human and Selenian standing in the Confederation. The technology that the Voxians had sought to compromise became the foundation for a new era of cross-species cooperation and technological exchange. And Miles Harper, once an invisible maintenance worker, found himself at the center of these historic developments, all because he'd done what engineers do best, identifying problems and creating solutions, one repair at a time. As human and Selenian civilizations grew closer through this unprecedented bond, one phrase entered the diplomatic lexicon of the Confederation, referencing how a simple act of repair had changed the course of interstellar relations. Sometimes, the most important diplomatic tool is knowing how to fix what's broken. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.